Don't fuck up. Don't fuck yourself. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Rude Cooking School Podcast. I'm your host, John Hauser III. It's so weird to see your name with the third on the end. It's so weird. Been doing this for my whole life. It never stops being weird. Anyway, it's the Rude Cooking School Podcast. I'm here by myself. Evan went, I don't know where Evan is. Who cares? F that guy. No, we're doing a listener questions episode, and I gave him the day off because you know what? I'm nice like that. Evan's hanging photos in his house that he is still moving into. He's having a great night, and he says hi. Anyway, so I'm gonna get this out of the way up top. For next week. Welcome to episode 299, by the way, everyone. Next week will be 300. It's going to be a banger of an episode. It's going to be a chef episode. We're going to do one of the biggies everybody knows. And then I'm going to take a summer break from the podcast. I'm going to take the month of August off. I've been doing this podcast for 7 years almost. And I've never taken a break. So it's going to be fun. I'm going to get a lot of tan lines and probably I'll put some of that white stuff on my nose because I don't want to burn. It's, when you're a redhead, you got to do that. And I'm just going to sit by the pool and drink some cocktails with a little umbrella in it. Yeah, none of that's going to happen. I'm going to probably stay down here in the basement just figuring out what episodes I'm going to do and probably record some filler ones in case we need a emergency episode. But regardless, I will be taking the month of August off, and we'll figure something out. Now, let's get to the questions. I want to just jump in and do the thing, and let's go. We are going to start with question number 1 from friend of the podcast, friend of the Facebook page, your friend and my friend, Soren Marquardt. Question: what's your favorite cod recipe? I've had some hanging out in the freezer, and I want to figure out something that isn't fish and chips. Well, bad luck, Soren, because you want to do fish and chips, but you want to do little fish and chips and make fish fingers and put them into tortillas and make fish tacos. It's funny because I was actually reading this and I'm like the whole time I was writing out my response, I'm like, oh shit, I know what I'm having for dinner tomorrow. I'm definitely making fish tacos. But yeah, if you take the cod and, you thaw it out, and then with most frozen fish, you really have to, wrap it in newspaper and get the water out of it. And then, make your best batter. You can use cake flour. It has a lower protein, so it doesn't create so much gluten. You could use rice flour. You could do a thing with panko, or you could use a potato starch, whatever your best dredge and or batter to make a super crispy on the outside fish finger. And then, you char up your tortillas. You could put down some salsa verde, or even better, some sriracha mayo. Then your fish finger, top it with some super finely shredded cabbage. Nobody likes that thick shit that even they serve at restaurants. By the way, I had a fish taco 6 months ago that was mainly a cabbage taco, and I was really fucking pissed. So angry that I was just I'm gonna eat this fucking cabbage. I was hate eating it. Fine, I'm gonna eat this cabbage taco. I'm not gonna say anything to anybody because I'm afraid of people. But not really. I was just I hate bothering servers. But yeah, finely shredded cabbage, little salt on it, maybe a little lime juice, or if you want to add, chili powder to the cabbage, whatever. Or you can make a whole slaw. A lot of people do that. I'm not a big fan of that. I like to keep mine simple. And then some pickled red onion, which is awesome. And then limes. Sometimes I also do like a chunky salsa with like tomatoes and mango, or, you know, pineapple, or, you know, however festive you want to get with it. Depends. But yeah, dude, do some fish tacos. I'm making them tomorrow because of your question. I will shout out that I was thinking one of the first things that when I hear cod, my brain goes to there's a Spanish dish called peel peel. It's cod and peel sauce. It's a Spanish dish, and it's super easy, but it's with bacalao. It's with salt cod, and I always forget that. But I've made it a bunch of times. Anytime I get salt cod, this is what I make, and it's super easy. It's just like salt cod, garlic, olive oil, and some chilies, dried chilies. You just chop them up, or fresh chilies. And basically, you know, you hydrate the salt cod. You got to put it in water over 2 days and keep changing the water to get the saltiness out of it. And then you basically kind of cook this. You cook the cod in the oil that also has the garlic in it. The garlic infuses into the oil, and then you're also shaking the dish, and that little bit of agitation emulsifies the garlic with the water that's left inside the fish. And there's something about the salt coddiness of it that there's something in the fish that helps it emulsify, and you get this just lovely garlic infused oil with some chilies. And then I don't know if you've ever had salt cod, but it's got a completely different texture than fresh fish, and it's awesome. And it's really good with just some bread. So look it up. Peel. Okay. Next, Johanna Smith. By the way, if you are in the Baltimore area and you need a chef, like someone to cater your stuff, go with Johanna. We used her for when my wife and I did a remarriage, when we renewed our vows in April. Johanna made a giant charcuterie board for us, and it was awesome, and everyone loved it, and she's a rock star. Like, she's great. Look her up. She's awesome. Her question, not really a question, but kind of, she said, isn't gazpacho really a vegetable smoothie in a bowl? Well, yeah, kind of. But I mean, as she knows, I think she was just trying to be a smart ass. But like, you know, one, I'm going to say up front, I'm not a huge gazpacho fan because of that fact. But I really enjoy it when it's half pureed and then you garnish the shit out of it with fresh vegetables, like, you know, half tomatoes, little moons of zucchini, scallions. You could put some, you know, red pepper in there. I love that kind of stuff to gives it some body. And then, you know, hit it with some herbs like basil or mint, or a basil oil, you know, on top, that kind of thing. And I really like my gazpacho. I like a chunky gazpacho, like that. But yeah, yes, vegetable smoothie. Normally when you get just a bowl of pureed vegetables and shit, and normally it's just not very good. What are you going to do? You can make it like, I never eat gazpacho out because normally it's not very good unless I see someone eating it and I'm like, oh shit, that's the thing that I dig, and then I'll order it. But yeah, normally no. I will say, this actually brought to mind a Jamie Oliver tomato recipe from early 2000s. There was a show he had, and it made a really big impact on me at the time. It's called Jamie at Home. If you ever want to watch it, I have the cookbook from it. It's a fucking great cookbook. I still use it today. I still use recipes out of it. He did a tomato consomme that was really crazy. Like, when I first saw it, I was like, that sounds terrible. And then one day, probably in the mid to late 2000s, I tried it. I was like, man, fuck it. Let's see. Because we had a lot of tomatoes. We had gone and just bought a bunch. And it's basically, you take tomatoes, vodka, grated horseradish, fresh horseradish, salt, pepper, vinegar, basil, garlic cloves, and then like one slice of beetroot, like a thick, 1/2-inch slice. And then you put everything in a food processor and just blend the shit out of it until it's like slushy. And then you strain it in cheesecloth for like 8 hours. Sounds like a lot, but then you just basically drink all the water that comes out of the tomatoes. You squeeze it, at the end, but it gives up a lot of water. The beetroot really is kind of there just for color, because I don't know if you guys know this. If you take tomatoes and blend them and then salt them, the water that comes out is literally watercolored. Basically, it's just kind of like a light yellow, like it's not red. Which is kind of fucks your head up, because you're like, this ain't tomato juice, it's just water, but it's tomato flavored water. I like to, when I was writing for the Sun, I did a tomato thing based kind of on that, where you take tomatoes, blitz them up, salt the shit out of them, strain them, collect the water, add some gin, and then there was a couple other things I added to it. You can look up just John Hauser third tomato drink or whatever the fuck, and it'll come up. But yeah, it's a really good soup. And it's just a tomato consomme. It's really clear. You can you can garnish with a little bit of basil and some olive oil, I think, if I'm remembering correctly. And it's really refreshing. And of course you can't serve it to kids. There's vodka in it, but the amount of vodka to tomatoes wasn't a lot. It was like 4.5 pounds of tomatoes and like a half a cup of vodka. So it was like a lot of tomatoes. 4.5 pounds is kind of a lot. And then, the vodka is just kind of there to, make it happy, I guess. You could totally just leave it out if you want, but the salt's really good. The vinegar, I would go with sherry vinegar, and then garlic cloves, kind of just blitz all the shit together, and it's pretty rad. So yeah, check that out. Next question from Shannon Cole. How, for the love of God, do I cook rice on a stovetop? Exclamation mark, question mark, exclamation, question mark. I always end up too gummy or too undercooked. Good question, Shannon. So right out of the gate, I don't do stovetop. I haven't for years. I had a rice cooker that was great that I used because when I was younger, I had that problem. And I got my first rice cooker when I was like, Christ, it was probably like 20 years ago, because I had seen somebody and I was like, what is this magical thing? And then realized you could cook other things in it besides rice. But when I got my Instant Pot, the rice cooker became superfluous. And I know the rice cooker sometimes can be a little bit, actually more dialed in, but my rice cooker was pretty old at that point and it was burning the bottoms. It wasn't a great rice cooker. So I just swapped it out for the Instant Pot. And honestly, I just do the Instant Pot now. And the recipe for Instant Pot is actually really, really interesting. It's basically 1 cup of rice to 1 cup of water, which isn't stovetop kind of ratios. We'll get into that in a second. But it literally is like, I'll just dump in 2 cups of rice, 2 cups of water, salt. I'll throw in a knob of butter, and then Bob's your uncle. It's done in 3 minutes, high pressure 3 minutes. Let it, release for 10, then take it out, fluff it, and you're good to go. But with doing rice on the stovetop, the first thing I will say, and this is a thing, like I've been really getting in the rice in the last like year or two. Like I've eaten more rice in the last 2 years than I probably have in my whole life. And I'm getting pretty good at it. And it's one of those things that's like, when you think about it, you're like, what makes good rice, right? You don't want it mushy. Sometimes you do, but most of the times you don't. You want to be able to see individual pieces of rice, and they don't stick too much unless it's sticky rice, obviously. But you don't want it crunchy. And that's a ratio, that's a water thing, right? But the first thing I would say is rinse your rice. It's so important. It makes such a big difference. 2 changes of water. If you feel bad about just getting rid of the water, you can put it in your plants outside. You can put it in your dog's food. You can make horchata with it. You don't have to just throw it away if you feel bad about it, but you should rinse your rice. It's really, really important. It takes the extra starch off, and kind of cleans it up. Rice is, you'll be amazed at how dusty your rice is, and not dusty, but it's rice dust. They're constantly grinding on each other. So get that extra starch off first. And that's really important. And then for rice ratio for a stovetop, it's usually 4 to 5. Which sounds really weird, but if you think about it in half a cups, 4 to 5 half a cups. So 4 half a cups would be 2 cups of rice. 5 half a cups would be 2.5 cups of water. So 2 cups of rice to 2.5 cups of water. That might seem like a lot, but it'll get you, it'll keep you in rice for at least whatever dinner you're making, and have a little bit for extras. And then, you let your water come to a boil, you put your rice in, stir it up a little bit for the first minute or two. You don't have to just let it sit. It's like pasta that way, where you can stir it while it's cooking, but once it really starts to absorb, just take a step back. So then you let it cook for, I don't know, 4 to 5 minutes, 3 to 5 minutes. But you'll see the water start to absorb, but then you'll see that there's little craters forming that are sputtering. And once you see them, you're almost there. And then once the craters form, you just put the heat on low, let it cook for 10 minutes, then turn the heat off, cover it, and then let it sit for another 10 minutes, and then fluff it, and you're ready to go. That's a good just rule of thumb. And every burner's different, every pot's different, depending on what rice you're doing. This is just kind of plain ass white rice, long grain, I'm supposing. And yeah, I hope that helps. But yeah, I really love the Instant Pot for it, because you can cook a lot of rice too. You can cook a lot of fucking rice and not really have to worry about it. You just know that at the 3 minutes on high pressure, once it gets up, you're good to go. Dara Bungeon, the great Dara Bungeon, has a question which I had never heard about. And I was really interested, because I was like, that's not a thing, but it totally is. So here's our question. I have a technical one. Baking, if a recipe calls for room temp eggs, but it's too late to get that done and you use a refrigerated egg, how will that affect the finished product? And I was like, in my head, I'm like, well, it's not really going to do anything. But then I started thinking about it, and I was like, well, I'm a ding dong, so I probably should look this up, because I really don't know the answer. And I found the answer at King Arthur's Banking Company website. Do eggs used in baking really need to be at room temperature? And they say yes. So what they say is either choose a non-temperature dependent cake recipe, and then they give you one, or put off your cake baking, because when a King Arthur recipe or any thoughtful recipe that's developed calls for room temperature eggs, which would be between 68 and 70 degrees, then room temperature they should be. When a cake calls for room temperature, butter and sugar together until light and fluffy, then gradually adding room temperature eggs, you're creating a foundation for your cake structure. During the beating, the combination of sugar crystals, the butter creates air bubbles. Adding eggs introduces water from the whites, which combines with the sugar to create a syrup that fixes itself in suspension around those air bubbles, effectively trapping them. Adding your remaining ingredients carefully, you don't want to break the suspension, and you'll have a high rising cake with fine crumbs. What happens if you add a cold egg? The delicate butter sugar air combo you've just beaten together is damaged when the cold eggs stiffen the butter into sharp chunks. This hardened butter rips apart the suspension, and all of a sudden those air bubbles are gone. Not a good thing, and your cake won't rise and the texture will be coarse. Some cakes start by beating eggs with sugar instead of the eggs with butter, but the desired result is always the same: trapped air bubbles. Start with cold eggs, and it's much more difficult to coax air into the mixture. So there you go. It's crazy, right? Like, who'd have thought that was actually a thing? I mean, of course it is, because people are awesome and research this kind of stuff and, do the work for us, and then we can look it up and find it. But yeah, so my thing would be to take the chill off the eggs would be to put them. Oh, they say it too. Oh, I was just scrolling down. I didn't get that far. To put the eggs in a bowl of warm water, like hot water, like hot from the tap, not hot off the stove. The hot water won't affect your eggs, but like after like 10 minutes, they'll be nice and warm. They'll be ready to go. So yeah, take the chill off your eggs with some warm, hot water, because the eggs are already cold. So once you put them in there, to sort of even out to warm water. And then, like, I do that all the time with hard boiled eggs. Like, I'll just fill up a quart takeout container with hot water from the tap, and then throw the eggs in there and just let it sit for 10 minutes while I get my rice bowl or, whatever I'm, toast my toast for, whatever. And then put the eggs peel easier because they're warm, and then they're warm to touch. Cold jammy eggs or cold hard-boiled eggs suck. So there you go. That was a great question. Like, I learned a lot from that. It was awesome. Lorraine Scar asks, how do I get crispy skin on my fish without overcooking it? I mean, is there some kind of trick to this? Because I love a good crispy skin, but I always end up demolishing the fish to get crispy skin results. Drives me crazy. I agree. Crispy skin on fish is fucking awesome. And there's a couple ways that you can deal with this. And what I like to do, one, is to make sure that you wipe the skin down and really, really get it dry. Moisture is the enemy. Like, it will, once you hit water, if the skin's wet, as soon as it hits the oil in the pan, it evaporates and turns into steam, and then you're just steaming your skin. So, just pat it dry and keep it, skin up before you cook it, right? It also keep it out for, a couple minutes before you eat it. I mean, before you start to cook it. So to take the chill off too, I would recommend never using a nonstick pan for crispy fish. It won't stick, but it won't get super crispy, just because that's how nonstick pans work a lot. Like, they're good for stuff non-sticking, but not for getting things super crispy. I would use a stainless steel pan. You can use cast iron. I do all the time, but you really have to clean it afterwards, because cast iron's non-porous and fish really, really holds on to cast iron pans. Enamel would work great here. But with enamel or cast iron or stainless steel, you really, really, really have to make sure that before you put that fish in there, it's hot. And just, put it on there, put it on the heat, and just let it go. Let it go for a couple minutes before you even Do it. And a good way to test it, if it's like super hot, just take a drop of water, drop it on there. If it skids across, you're good. You're pretty much good to go. Because it's so hot that it's just turned it into like basically a miniature hovercraft. If it hits and sticks and then evaporates, not hot enough. You want it skidding across. Like you want it fucking rocket hot, like super hot. Then just add a couple tablespoons of oil, shimmer, you want to see it shimmer, move it around, put the skin face down. It's going to make a fucking noise. It's going to spit all over the place, but this is how you get crispy skin. Then use a fish spatula or something super thin to get under it, to like press on the fish first to like get that connection between the skin and the pan. And then this is where it's hard. You just got to let it go. Everybody wants a prod. Everybody wants poke. Everyone wants to try to let go. Like keep looking, keep flipping it. Don't touch that motherfucker. Just let it sit there and crisp up. In like 3.5 to 4 minutes, you can start checking, but it's going to feel like summer break. It's going to feel like 18 hours or 127 hours with your fucking arm caught in a boulder. It's going to feel really long, but don't touch it. Then you can start peeking, and then you can start like, get it under there and try to move it. See if it's releasing. If it doesn't budge, let it go. It's okay. Let it go. You're not going to burn it. You might burn it. It's okay. You're going to learn, but don't move it. And then, give it another 30 seconds, then try it. And eventually it will release. And then you're good. Then you flip it one time and then you're good. Just, you're only going to flip once. You know what I mean? Like 1 minute on that top side, like that's it. And you're pretty much good to go because all that heat from the bottom has come up through the fish. Fish cooks super, super quick. Then you can salt it when you're done and you're out. So I hope that helps. And I still have this problem. Like I want to flip the fish. Everybody wants to flip the fish. I don't have a fish flipper. I use just a spatula, but anything thin that can get under there and, try to help release it, you're good to go. But one of these days I'll get one of those fancy fish flippers. I can never bring myself to do it, but it's not just for fish. It's just me being a fucking idiot, being like, well, it's a unitasker. It's kind of stupid, but it's not at all. It's built for a reason. Okay. Michelle Bennett has a question as well. Simple cheese sauce question. Mine always splits. I've followed recipes. I've tried many times. More often than not, it splits. And when it doesn't, more often than not, it splits. And when it doesn't, I have no idea why. Oh, okay. Roux. Roux is your friend. Always do a roux. Start with a roux, which is the name of this show, Rude Cooking School Podcast. I'm an idiot who thought a play on words would be really smart and people would find funny, but after 7 years, they still go rocks. What is this? And then I'm just like, I gotta explain it, and it's never good when you have to explain it. But a roux is awesome, and a roux is equal parts flour and butter. So if you're going to use 1 tablespoon of butter, use 1 tablespoon of flour. You put them in a pan together, mix them together, let them cook a little bit, cook out the raw flour taste. And then, you can take it to a dark roux, which, people put in gumbos and stuff like that. But normally you just do a blonde roux just to cook out the flavor of the raw flour. And then it gets a little toasty and you're good. And then you add your liquid, which for cheese sauce would be normally milk. And then, whisk that till it's nice and creamy. Keep adding liquid, whisk, liquid. And then add your cheese. And depending on what cheese, cheese is actually, it doesn't really depend that much. It's all going to melt in there. And then, once it melts, the roux, mixes and creates an emulsion with the cheese itself to form a cheese sauce. And you should be good from that point on. Like once you make what you did with the roux and the milk, you made a very basic bechamel. And then, salt, pepper, hot sauce, mustard powder if you want, onion powder if you want, whatever you put in your cheese sauce. I'm not going to ask questions. You do your thing. I'll do my thing. We can share information, and that's great. Like I like a little white pepper. I like hot sauce, salt, cheese. That's usually what I'm good at. One thing I have been doing though, like if I'm going to do like something like mac and cheese, and I get what you're saying with the grain, like if it's breaking and you see it and it's like grainy and it kind of a pain in the ass. A slice of American cheese will really help fortify your sauce. And I've done that a lot, just, in casers kind of deal, like, just in case, I'm just going to do it. And the reason is because there is a sodium in processed cheese that keeps it emulsified. And just a little bit, like literally like 1 or 2 slices of just plain, you can just use white ass American cheese. And it helps, really keep it in there from breaking, and it's pretty awesome. So yeah, go for it and do your thing. I have faith in you. You will be awesome. Please let me know if it works. But no, seriously, like a roux, like, and the thing with the roux is, look up the roux and look up the ratios of like, how much roux to how much liquid, because that makes a big difference too. If you have too much roux, it's going to be too thick. If you have too little roux, it's going to be thin, and it won't really emulsify properly. So there you go. Jessica Albert says, this may be dumb. It's not dumb. There's no dumb questions. But is there really a difference between liquid measuring and dry measuring? I was taught there was, but I see people using them interchangeably. There absolutely is a difference between liquid measuring and dry measuring. Liquid measuring would be measuring by volume. And dry measuring, there's 2 different ways to do that. And that's by volume as well. When you consider cups or teaspoons or tablespoons, that's volume, but weight is the way to go. And I weigh everything on a scale to have a more accurate representation, because, if you have dry ingredients in a cup, like, okay, how hard did you pack it? Like, flours, you can really pack it in there. And if you pack that much flour in there to where it's like really tight, that's going to weigh more than just an easily scooped cup. Same thing with like tablespoons of stuff, like a tablespoon of salt, considering whether it's kosher salt or iodized salt or even different kind of kosher salts. Like the difference between kosher salts is crazy. So it's just better to, and honestly, when I look at recipes, if they don't have weights, I normally don't use them, because that's a person who doesn't think of the small things. So I instantly think that their recipe's bad, which I know isn't the case, but it's better to have the weights, because then it's a more easily replicable recipe. So yeah, do that. Weigh everything. So I hope that helps. Cindy Wiley Henderson asks, if you double a recipe, should you routinely double all ingredients? I recently made a couscous salad and doubled everything. 4 teaspoons, doubled from 4 tablespoons, doubled from 2 tablespoons, made the salad very oily. I think about this a lot, because the same thing has happened to me. So when it comes to the food itself, like the vegetables or the proteins or the broths or that kind of stuff, you can totally double that. No problem. But it's the spices, the oils, that kind of stuff. It's better to start off by multiplying it by, like, let's say if you're doubling the recipe, so to be times 2, with the spices and the oils and stuff like that, do it 1.5 first, then taste it. And then, you'll see where you need to go. Okay, well, I need a little bit more salt. The pepper, the spice levels where I want it, but it could use a little bit more of this, a little bit more of that. The oiliness is great, that kind of thing. So it's probably better to just do it that way. But for like the actual ingredients of the food, yeah, totally. You can do that. For baking, it's it's pretty much 1-to-1. So you can double it, but baking soda and baking powder get a little weird. So you need to make sure that they're in a good proportion. So that, and with baking, it's better, honestly, to make, as long as you're scaling whatever you are scaling, like say if you're making biscuits, yeah, you can make a big thing of that, but just make sure that you're making the biscuits to what they're saying, what the recipe says the size of the biscuit should be. Does that make sense? Like where, they're saying when you scale it out, like you want a 4-ounce biscuit, cut or whatever, that kind of thing. You don't want to double the size of the biscuit because then cooking times are weirder, proportions are off. The temperature, you might get it cooked on the outside, but it'd be a little gooey on the inside. So that kind of thing. Baking's a whole other animal with doubling and upscaling recipes. But with stuff like pasta salad, yeah, totally. Just double everything. 1.5 the spices and the oil and stuff like that. And then taste and go. And honestly, tasting as you go is a thing that it just should happen. And always trust yourself, and better than, you're the one that's going to be eating it or serving to people. Like, how do you want it to be? So yeah, just start at 1.5 and then go from there. Adria Robley Hertzmark says, what is the trick for making pastry with a food processor and not overworking it? I can use the same recipe with a pastry cutter and they come out beautiful and flaky. When I try to use a food processor, they're overworked. I'm only pulsing. Yeah, that's a pain in the butt. There's just one, the only answer I have to that is just cold. Make sure your butter's frozen almost. Like having almost frozen butter to the point of it being kind of frozen on the outside. Like, again, let's go back to biscuits. I chop up my butter into little cubes. Then I put it in the freezer while I'm getting all my mise en place for the rest of it done. And because I use a food processor a lot for making certain things, certain baked goods or whatever, when I don't feel like cutting it in with a cutter or using my hands, which works well too. But the reason that it gets weird and overworked is because the friction from the blades in the food processor heats up the butter, or the heat from the actual unit heats up the butter, and then it just kind of blends together. So like if you have to add liquids, if you have to have water, I always use ice water. I have literally ice in water. Then right as I need it, I measure it out into a cup and then put it into the thing I'm, making. If you want to be a maniac, and I have done this before and I'm not ashamed of it, if it calls for using milk, freeze milk ahead of time. It sounds really fucking crazy, but you don't want to put ice cubes in milk and dilute your milk, but you can freeze milk and it turns into ice, and then you have ice milk, and then you can keep your milk really, really, really cold. It makes a giant difference. Like, it really does. And the butter thing is really, really, key, to creating like that sort of flakiness, because what happens with baked goods with butter in it is if you have pieces of butter and then it goes into the oven, once the heat hits it, that butter turns into two things. It turns into oil and it turns into steam. The steam rises your, whatever baked good that you're making. Let's keep with biscuits. Your biscuits get bigger, and then the oil part keeps it moist, and then the milk solids from the butter flavors it. So there you go. And that's it. That was a really, really good bunch of questions. Good job, everybody. Okay, so I'll be back next week with episode 300. And thank you for listening to the Rude Cooking School podcast. We really appreciate it. Join our Facebook group. Join the madness that's over there. There's it's actually a really, really great place to ask your questions. And there are a lot of chefs that are in the group. There are a lot of great home cooks and just, great cooks in general, that can give you your answers. We ask questions all the time. We share dumb memes. We share stupid stories. People share recipes, pictures of the foods they've made. It's awesome. It's actually the purest place I've ever seen on Facebook. We don't suffer fools. People get bounced. I've only had to bounce a couple people, but it happens. But in general, it's a really, really fun, safe space for people to ask questions and learn and share and be dumb and have fun. So do that. And then also share your experience with the Rude Cooking School podcast with your friends and family. And that's how we get our advertisements, all word of mouth. We don't pay for anything. We don't, buy Facebook time or fucking, Google, whatever. It's word of mouth, and it gets around, and I see it, and it really helps. And if you can, rate and review us on whatever podcast listening device you listen on. If you're listening on Spotify, rate us. If you're listening on iTunes, rate us, give us a review. It really, really helps. It pops us up in the algorithm for people to just come across us and see it. And it would really help. I appreciate it. Okay, so that's it for this week. Thank you for listening to the Rude Cooking School podcast. I am John Hauser III. Don't yuck my yum, and garbage everything. And I will see you guys next week for episode 300. Peace.